as you say on Earth. Okay, bye. I love you.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
I love you.
I love you.
Greetings and salutations, guys. I'm here with a review of Elio, the newest movie from Pixar, returning to science fiction, a genre that they've had the highs of WALL-E with and the not so highs of Lightyear, although I do think that movie is overhated. But they're returning to that realm here with the story of Elio, who is an 11-year-old boy who is kind of an outcast, kind of a loner, and he is very space obsessed. He is very alien obsessed. In fact, all he dreams about is aliens coming down and taking him up into outer space. And because this is a Pixar movie, guess what? That's going to happen. And not only is he brought into space, but they accidentally think, these aliens that grab him, that he is the leader of Earth. He decides he's going to go along with that, making it a big lie that he now has to protect. And as you might expect, that might not be his greatest decision. Elio arrives with some drama behind the scenes. There was a director change in the middle of production, and the original director, Adrian Molina, he left the movie, and he was replaced by two directors, Domi Shi, director of the excellent Turning Red, and Madeline Sharafian. I would not say that a director change or huge changes in the production of an animated movie in general, but a Pixar movie specifically, mean the end of the world. It happens a lot in animation and in Pixar history, going back to Toy Story 2, Ratatouille is another example. We've seen this before where they change massive things behind the scenes about a movie, and they might also change who's directing it, and they sometimes end up with a masterpiece. Now, do I think Elio is a masterpiece? No, but I think it's a pretty solid animated movie that, at the end of the day, is quite enjoyable. Parts of Elio play as kind of a reverse E.T. as far as this lonely boy who ends up going into outer space, where he does end up befriending an alien. That alien is Glorden, and Glorden is a worm-like alien kid. Their bond becomes a key aspect of the movie, and I do admire them for putting so much of the emotional heft of this story on a web-spinning, eyeless, giant-toothed slug creature, but you know what? I think it works. There's also a little bit of an echo of Lilo and Stitch here, because you have a kid who is an orphan being raised by an older relative, his aunt in this case, voiced by Zoe Saldana, who kind of feels overwhelmed by the situation, even though she loves this kid. And then that kid ends up, again, befriending an alien. But of all the movies that I feel might have influenced Elio, the one that amused me the most is The Last Starfighter, the 1984 sort of cult sci-fi film, because there is a subplot here about the fact that the aliens, to protect the fact that Elio is gone and so that no one will be worried about him, create a clone of him that can go and live with his aunt, and she will not be aware of what's going on, and no one around will be aware that he is missing. And if you've ever seen Last Starfighter, you know that the same sort of thing happens in that movie for the main character to cover for him. And there is some very funny and very interesting and weird stuff they do with that idea in this film. In Last Starfighter, it was actually pretty creepy. It kind of pulled the scenes with that sort of clone android creature they made, and they lean into that here in a big way. And actually, there are some really big laughs from this weird clone that is now walking around claiming to be Elio. The thing is, generally speaking, this is a weird movie. The depiction of outer space here is notably trippy and filled with very offbeat and odd visuals. The humor is often very pointed, and sometimes, if not dark, it is dark adjacent in a way I very much appreciated. I think it gets away with some things you might not expect it to because it does it in sort of the trappings of cute. But when you actually think of what's happening, it's messed up in a pretty clever way. Now, all that being said, the first half of Elio is pretty clunky. It takes quite a while for it to really kind of gel. There's just something about the overall vibe that doesn't quite come together for a bit. And while it's having its moments and having some funny beats, it also has its fair share of awkward beats as well. But this is a movie that gets better and better the further you go into it. And yes, ultimately, that trademark Pixar heart and soul, it clicks in, and it clicks in pretty big, I'd say, by the end. Because yes, this movie did eventually grab me emotionally, and I felt it had some very sweet and very poignant moments. The voice cast is very good, and I really liked Jonas Kabrib as Elio, along with Remy Edgerly as Glorden. the two of them have this great rapport. They are two little kids who are finding each other as best friends. They are two strange kids who find each other as best friends, and I think you really do connect to that friendship, which is such a key part of the film.
Gordon, I am not fireproof!
Why didn't you say something?
Gordon!
Just get in my mouth.
It's actually kind of comfy in here.
It is? I've never been in there.
Also very entertaining is Brad Garrett as the voice of Lord Gregon. This is Glorden's dad, who has grand plans for his son to be a warlord, just like Daddy is, not understanding that Glorden does not want to follow that path. And I laughed a lot at some of the things that Gregon talks about, which is a lot about blood wars and the glory of battle and everything he wants to do to sort of conquer his way through the galaxy in a very grandiose manner. And the film benefits from a really nice score by Rob Simonson that very much captures the sort of fanciful science fiction yet heartwarming vibe that the movie is going for. I wasn't sure what to make of Elio going in. The trailers hadn't really sold me on the movie. At the same time, I was kind of bummed out to hear it's not tracking well at all because I want original movies, original animated movies included, to do well. And when we've had two absolutely massive successes this summer with live action remakes of great original animated movies from, 15 to 25 years ago with Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon, even though I enjoyed both those movies, both the live action remakes, I also want original animated movies to do well because you don't get, the $1 billion grossing Lilo and Stitch live action remake if you don't get Lilo and Stitch. And Elio isn't as good as Lilo and Stitch, and yet it's still really good. It still, delivers a, very entertaining, sweet story that I think is worth seeing. Because those initial hesitations and even the fact that when the movie began, I was like, this isn't quite working for me. It really kind of fell by the wayside the further and further I got into the movie. And by the end, I was completely on board for it. Look, if Elio ends up bombing, it will not affect the quality of the movie and won't affect the fact that people can still love it. But I do hope it does well. I don't know if it's going to have the kind of legs Elemental did, which, opened pretty poorly and then just held on so amazingly for weeks and weeks and weeks, because it is weirder, because I think it is, going into sort of a quirkier place that maybe isn't for everyone. Then again, it's very hard to tell what kids are going to resonate with, and I hope that kids will resonate with this. I think that there's definitely stuff there that some kids will very much vibe with, and maybe some kids won't be into the strangeness of it, but that's okay too. So Elio, I think, it's kind of it's an underdog in a lot of ways, but it's a movie about an underdog character, and I think ultimately it really does sort of succeed on its own terms. So those are my thoughts on Elio as it hits theaters this weekend. If you can like and subscribe, that would be excellent. All right, guys, see you next time.